Bloopatone.
Hey there, this is Eric Keller for Bloopatone. A couple weeks ago, I posted a video on my YouTube channel on how to scan objects directly into ZBrush for the iPad using your iPad. And in the comments for that video, someone asked about how to use the extractor brushes to grab some of the cool rust and wood textures that was coming through in the scan and to create their own brushes using those textures and the alphas. So that's what this video is all about. I'm going to go through the process entirely on the iPad. I have created a previous video on the extractor brushes, which you can check out on my Bloopatone YouTube channel. Now, in this video, I'm doing everything on the iPad and I'm doing it without a keyboard. However, if you can afford one and you're going to use ZBrush on the iPad on a regular basis, I strongly recommend getting some kind of keyboard interface because then you can use the hotkeys and it reduces the amount of hunting around in the menus in the ZBrush interface. So that being said, I hope you enjoy this video and I hope it gives you some ideas on how many cool brushes you can create when you make your scans using ZBrush for the iPad. All right, so let's take a look at how we can extract a texture from a model that I scanned. So here we have this kind of odd sort of shuttered fountain that I scanned in a small town here in France. And just taking a look at the model, if you look at the point count in the window, it's about 12,000 points. So the first thing we need to do is subdivide this model to get enough that we can extract a decent scan. So I'm going to hit that divide button a bunch of times and get it up to about 4.8 million points. The next thing we need to do is convert the texture that's on the model into polypaint. So if we go into the tool palette here, scroll down and find that texture map subpalette, you can see when I turn the texture on button off and on, the texture disappears. Currently, it's a texture based on the automatic UVs. Let's go to the polypaint and press on the polypaint from texture button. I have a little warning here telling me to turn on mRGB. So I'll go over to the toolbar here, click on the RGB button, and down at the bottom, turn on mRGB. So now let's try that again. Polypaint from texture. So now we have converted the texture into polypaint, and we can test this by going back down to the texture map subpalette. If I turn texture on or off, you can see it switches between the texture and the polypaint. So I want to make sure that texture is on is turned off so that we're looking at the polypaint. And now we need to go to the undo history and store this state in undo history. This is important in order to get the extractor brush to work correctly. So store the current state in undo history. So let's prep the brush. To do this, we'll go into the alpha palette and under the extractor options, I'm going to turn on a from brush and increase the alpha width to 1024 so I can get the highest resolution extraction possible. Let's go into the brush palette here, and under X, I'm going to click on Extractor so that we now have Extractor as our current brush. Okay, we're ready to actually make an extraction. To do this, we need to switch the brush into Extractor mode. Now, if you're used to using this brush on the desktop, then you know that the G hotkey will activate extraction mode for the extractor brushes. If you're on the iPad and you have a keyboard, same thing. You can just press G on your keyboard. But what if you don't have a keyboard? So let me adjust the model here to find a nice little spot that I want to make an extraction from. Okay, so if you don't have a keyboard, what you'll need to do is go back into that alpha palette under the extractor options. We're going to have to use that from brush button again. I'm going to lower my draw size here a little bit using the slider in the toolbar and then click on the from brush stroke. When I do that, you can see how the cursor tunes that light blue. So that means we're in extractor mode. So I'll just drag slowly on part of the model here, and then it's going to process that part that I just stroked on in the model and capture the texture as well as the alpha and make that part of the brush. It's going to take a while because I increased the resolution up to 1024. So if you have a smaller resolution or lower polygon model, it might take less time. It all depends. But you really want to try and get the highest resolution you can. Make sure your brush looks good. So it's finished. You can see the alpha and the texture there. And you can see when I stroke on this part of the model, I get that kind of cool wood grain with the old paint on it. So I'm going to go into the subtool palette and let's add a new subtool. I'll just add the polymesh star. And then I'm going to go down here and turn on the solo button and just take a look here. Let's activate the gizmo and turn this into a polysphere. So I'm going to choose the polysphere and then subdivide it. So go up to this menu here, click on the subdivide button, and divide again and again. This is kind of why I suggest getting a keyboard, because access to the hotkeys makes this a lot faster. So it's much less hunting around in these menus. But now we have a nice high resolution sphere, and if I draw on it, I don't see anything but some bumps. So go into the subtool palette, turn on polypaint, there's my stroke. Now I have polypaint activated, and I can see that the texture converted into polypaint, painted across the sphere. I'm going to go into the palettes, find the stroke palette, and increase my lazy mouse radius so that I have a straighter stroke. So that looks really nice, and that could be quite useful. So if you get a capture of a texture that you like, do not forget that you need to save that brush. If I close ZBrush now, I will lose the brush. So I'm going to go to the export options, find my brush options, and then let's give this a name. I do have a keyboard hooked up, so I'm going to type in a name here. We'll call it something like Old Paint or something like that. If you don't have a keyboard, then you'll see the little virtual keyboard will pop up, or you could actually try scribbling a name in that field, but I find that doesn't work always as well as I'd like. I'm just going to call this Old Paint XTractor and make sure I'm going to type 01 here, and then press OK, and then choose a place to save it. I'll hit that export button. So it's not saved yet. I need to hit that export button, don't forget, and then I'll just save this to files in a directory on my iPad locally. So I'll just save that there, and now I have that brush stored and I can use it for future projects. Let's review the process really quickly. I'm just going to find another spot on that same model and make an extraction. I kind of like the little bolts there, the rusty little bolts in the door, so I'm going to zoom in there. And I still have that same spot in history stored, so I can just go up into the stroke palette, and I can go into the palettes, and under alpha, click on extractor options, click on that from brush, and now I can drag slowly over that area with the bolt to grab that area. So, and there we go. I'll release, and it's going to take a few moments to process here. I do have that history state stored for this model. That's always important. For whatever reason, it makes the extraction process more accurate. If you don't store the history, I've noticed sometimes you get a really strange result. It's kind of mangled. The alpha and the texture don't quite work. Sometimes it works, but storing that history state, as I've said, will make the result much better. Okay, so you can see the texture has now updated. So now I have a new brush that I can use, and you can see the brush cursor is turned back to red. So I'll just find a little spot on the model here just to test it out. So there we go. It looks nice. Nice repeating texture. I'll switch my subtool over to that sphere and draw across the surface here. And you can see there's the result. Looks pretty good. I'm going to switch over to this blue material and turn off the poly paint just so we can see kind of what the details drawn on the surface of that alpha look like. They're pretty good. I mean, it's a little bit low res, but we could definitely increase the quality of doing a little bit of sculpting there. But it's a nice brush to have to get some cool details down. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to review the entire process again using a different model. So I switch back to that white material. Let's take a look at a different model. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to this rusty crane that I scanned a few weeks ago. You can see how I scanned it in a previous video on my channel. But here's the big old rusty crane. I'm going to subdivide it, make sure it's got plenty of points. I'm going to get this one up to about 6 million points. And there we go. And now I need to go into the tool palette, find the texture subpalette, texture map subpalette, and let's convert the texture into a polypaint. So go to polypaint from texture, and now it is converted into polypaint. We can test this by turning the texture on button off and on. You can see the shift between the texture and the polypaint. So let's make sure that texture on is turned off. So we're looking at the polypaint. Okay, so there we are. And what I need to do next is store this point in history. You can see a little red exclamation point letting us know that there's a different history state stored. So I'm going to click on that bookmark. Now we've stored this state in undo history. Okay, so we're good to go there. So I'm going to zoom in, find a nice rusty spot. some things are going to work better than others. It's just the nature of the beast. So this one is going to work okay. But let's go into Alpha Palette here. Under Extractor Options, make sure that from Brush, turn that on. Then we can set the alpha width to 1024. And as with the brush button activated, I can drag across the surface, my cursor being blue there, indicating that it's an extraction mode. And I've dragged across the surface. Now it's creating that texture. You can see I can test it out here in another part of the model. It's a bit blurry. That one didn't quite work as well. So let's see if we can test another part of the model, see if we can get something a little bit better. So I'm just looking around. There's lots of cool parts on this model. It's not a complete scan, obviously, but this is great for, inspiration, for grabbing textures, for, kit bashing or whatever. So these bolts over here on this part of the crane look pretty cool. So I think what I'm going to do is decide, I think these bolts look really good. So I'm going to give this a try. So let's zoom in here, and I'm actually going to switch my extractor brush from the stroke type and go down to the X button for extractors, and I'm going to switch to extract drag rect. So now I'm kind of positioning the model there. That looks pretty good. Go to that Alpha Palette, Extractor Options, turn on from Brush. Find a good spot there. You can see my brush icon is blue. Drag out to an area that I want to capture. Something like that is pretty good. And now, of course, it's going to sit there and process. That extraction takes a little while, but the result on this one came out pretty well. With a scan like this, I could probably create a whole library of different brushes, just depending on how they come out. So this one looks pretty nice. I'm just testing it out here on this other part of the model, and I think that works pretty well. I'm going to take a look right here. Let's get a nice sphere to test this out on. So I'm going to go into Subtools, append that polygon star, and you could convert it into a plane. I just like using a sphere for whatever reason. So I'm going to activate the gizmo here and click on the gear icon, choose polysphere, and then subdivide it a bunch of times. I'm not using my keyboard shortcuts just so you can see what I'm doing and see where all these menus are. But there we go. That works pretty well. And let's go turn on Polypaint for that subtool and switch back to my extractor brush. And there we go. Looks pretty good. If I go into the subtool palette and turn off Polypaint, you can see just the result of the alpha there. So you can see those little bolts were drawn onto the surface. So that's pretty neat. Nice little texture there. I'm going to turn the focal shift down so there's a bit of a harder edge to the brush, and then zoom in here, and you can see when I drag on the surface, you get the square edges of it, so more of the texture is visible. And so you can do that as well. This might be a nice little stamp that you could drag around to create the bolts and the rust and all that kind of good stuff. Remember to save the brush. I'm not saving it for this demonstration, but don't forget to save the brush. I'll just see what it looks like with Polypaint off and that blue material. You can see those are the details right there. So there you go. How you can create a library of cool texture brushes, extractor brushes, using the scans that you created with the iPad. So again, check out my video on how to create scans using ZBrush for the iPad. And there you go. Okay, so there you go. Hope you enjoyed this video. Some more tips on using ZBrush for the iPad. If you have suggestions on other videos you'd like to see on ZBrush or ZBrush for the iPad, please leave a note in the comments. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.
Bloopatone.